Welcome, everybody. Of course, we are in a time of COVID, so we are all in our remote squares here, and we are so happy to have General Hodges as a guest. I just wanted to let everybody know that this is a recording of the International Conflict Resolution Center based in Washington, D.C. We are a non-governmental entity, a nonprofit organization set up under the laws of the United States, the District of Columbia, and thus we are not affiliated or aligned with any government officially. Again, sadly, because of COVID, we can't give all the bells and whistles, but we have I'm just going to give all the good stuff here. I have it here in my desk home for General Hodges and our guests. Of course, we have been created to study frozen conflict, specifically because of the prevalence of such frozen conflicts. We are in Europe, particularly around the Black Sea, the Caucasus, and of course, to some extent in Central Asia. Perhaps we will expand that to the African continent, to the Asian continent, and the Pacific. But for right now, we are concentrated on frozen conflicts, specifically ones where Russia is a major player. One of those being in the Black Sea, and that is why today we are talking to General Ben Hodges. Now, General Hodges is a West Point grad, of course. We have to put that in first. He was commander of the NATO Allied Land Command from 2012 to 2014, and he once served as chief legislative liaison for the United States Army. He is currently a Pershing Chair in the strategic studies at the Center for European Policy Analysis. General Pershing being one of my favorite generals. And perhaps when we get through some of the major policy questions, you can explain to us your role there at the in the Center for European Policy Studies. But for now, with all of that introduction, General, I wanted to go to my first question, which has to do with the Sea of Azov. The Russians have, in a sense, been harassing Ukrainian vessels in that body of water. They are trying to establish, or maybe perhaps even have established, control over that body of water. What do you see as Russia's main goals there and in the Black Sea in general? And this is within the context of their annexation of Crimea.
Well, Professor Chambers, thanks for the opportunity to be a part of this. Clearly, the Kremlin's objective is to totally dominate the northern coastline, if you will, of the Black Sea, and that includes Sea of Azov. They have total control of the Sea of Azov from the day they started building that bridge across the Kerch Strait. They automatically, with the bridge, significantly reduced the type of vessels that could sail in and out of there. And in my view, that bridge. This was not an accident, like the engineer didn't think about the height. This was intended to put a gate over the access into the Sea of Azov, and to choke out Mariupol and Berdansk, the two key seaports on Azov for Ukraine. And so this has in effect, this is a blockade of Ukraine, because Berdansk and Mariupol, of course, were very important, exporting for steel and other critical products, exports for Ukraine. Again, this was not an accident. And the Kremlin, this is classic, what some people call hybrid warfare, gray zone warfare, whatever. I think it's Russian warfare. They now make claims to territorial waters around Crimea because of their illegal annexation of Crimea, and which is the justification they used back in November of 2018 to attack the 3 Ukrainian naval vessels that were en route to go into Sea of Azov. And Russia said, no, they violated Russian territorial water. Of course, this is a completely false claim, but international law really is whatever the international community says it is. And if the West doesn't react to this, then de facto we have accepted Russia's claim to sovereignty in Crimea. And that's what Azov is all about. They are trying to establish control over the entire northern coast of the Black Sea.
Would this be analogous to Canada just closing off the St. Lawrence Seaway at certain points? I mean, it's that kind of a provocative move.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, they knew that nothing really bad was going to happen to them. I mean, they knew that Germany and France, but also the United States, especially over the last 4 years, was not going to do anything. I mean, there are some sanctions out there, but it has not had any effect on actions of the Kremlin.
Just to piggyback on that, because I'm going to move to.
That's actually a good analogy. The more I think about it, the Canadians closing off the St. Lawrence. I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, you know, there's an agreement between Russia and Ukraine about Azov,
Right.
And you know, Bismarck. I live here in Frankfurt, Germany. Bismarck once said that no treaty with the Russians is worth the paper it's written on, and this was, you know, back in the 19th century. So they are, if nothing else, they're consistent.
Well, before I jump to question two, I want to piggyback on that, because it's clearly, if Canada did that out of some spite over the War of 1812, I mean, you would hear a lot of noise. Why is there no noise from France, Germany, United States? What, I mean, can you give me a thumbnail? Because we're going to get back to that, but I just want to get that out in the open air. What, I mean, this is something that provocative. Why no noise?
No, I think there's two main reasons. Number one, the strategic significance of the Black Sea is not really appreciated in Washington or Brussels or Paris and Berlin. Not for us. I mean, everybody knows it's important to the Russians, but very few capitals acknowledge, like, wow, this is really important for us. This is a place we have to compete in diplomacy, information, military, and economy. And I'd be happy to kind of give you my thoughts on that.
Oh yeah, we're going to come back to that.
The second reason, the second reason is that I think Germany and France, Berlin and Paris, either for historical reasons or economic reasons or for whatever, they would give up Ukraine in a second if they had to choose between what's most important to them, Ukrainian sovereignty or their own economic relationship with Russia. And then unfortunately, even in the United States, to include during the Obama administration, there was this misguided belief that somehow, you know, that either Russia was in decline or we could reset the relationship, and let's just don't provoke them and that sort of thing. And that just reflects a very, very poor understanding of history. The Trump administration in particular, though, was ineffective and did nothing to put pressure on the Kremlin to meet commitments in international law.
I see. Well, let's keep that as the context, the backdrop for this next question. We have 3 NATO members, Bulgaria, Romania, and of course the Turks, on the Black Sea, the Sixth Fleet nearby in Italy. With that, what policies should we be pursuing in the region, given that we have these 3 members right there toe to toe, and fairly effective, an effective battle deterrent right there in Italy? What do you think we should be doing to ensure that security?
So first of all, I hope the Biden administration will look at the Black Sea as a region and develop a strategy for the region. You know, when the president told President Putin in their first phone call a few weeks ago that Ukrainian sovereignty was a priority for his administration, I was thrilled about that. But if he's serious about it and he's going to actually act on that, that means that the administration will have to have a strategy for the whole region, because Ukraine is not an island. Turkey is not an island. Romania is not an island. Georgia is not an island. It is all connected. And so a strategy that looks at the region, and where you move the region to the middle of the map, instead of it always being in the bottom right-hand corner of the map, And it changes how you think about the economic potential there as well as the military significance of it. Number two, we have got to fix our relationship with Turkey. I was stationed in Izmir for 2 years as NATO's Allied Land Commander. Uh, it's an incredible country, people, history, and all that, but a very, very difficult ally. They are spring loaded to be offended. But I think part of this, and I don't apologize for any of their bad decisions or bad behavior, but a brand new lieutenant could take a look at the map and say, "Oh, Turkey is really important," not just because of the Turkish Straits from the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles, but also as a bulwark against Iran and against Islamic extremism. So the alliance needs Turkey, no matter how frustrated they may be. And Turkey needs the West. Turkey needs the United States. So we've got to. I would say it's time for Turkey USA 2.0. We've got to rebuild the relationship. Think past Erdogan. Regimes change, but geography never changes. So we've got to think clear-eyed and long-term.
Do you think that some of these new EU member states, such as Romania and Bulgaria, can put pressure on the EU let's move from the strategic to the economic? Can they put pressure on the EU? Can Greece put pressure on the EU to move in a certain direction? These are countries that might not necessarily like Turkey either, but I mean, is there a possibility that these countries could produce any kind of leverage economically, or even swallow their distrust and join with Turkey and say, look, we need to take this more seriously to the EU and then also to NATO?
So Romania is our center of gravity in the Black Sea region. It should be Turkey, but for the variety of different reasons, and Turkey also does not want more NATO presence in the Black Sea region, not really, because they see themselves as sort of the executive agent for Turkey in the region. And the Montreux Convention limits, of course, the amount of NATO warships that could be there. The key is Germany. The key is Berlin. Germany is the economic powerhouse of the European Union. It's the leader de facto inside the European Union. And so I think, candidly, Romania and Greece, Bulgaria have very little leverage over Brussels. So that's why it's so important that the United States reach out to Berlin, that we figure out how do we collaborate on all of this. Now, the Biden administration, of course, and by the way, there are almost 4 million Turks that live in Germany. This is a carryover from the post-war Gastarbeiter, guest worker policies of Germany that brought in thousands of Turks because there was such a manpower shortage in Germany, obviously, after the war. So now you've got close to 4 million Turks that live here that are German citizens. That's a significant part of German culture and society now. So I think that Berlin is the right ally for us to work with, help Turkey, as well as dealing with the Kremlin. And the Biden administration has said that the EU is going to be a partner. It's no longer the foe that the Trump administration called them. It's a partner, and they are our largest economic partner. So we've got to work with them and build up appreciation for the strategic significance of the Black Sea. Now, I have encouraged all my friends in Georgia and Moldova and Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, and Ukraine that they have to put their voices together the way the Baltic countries did. Back in 2014, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania got together, and now everybody in Congress can correctly identify on the map Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. You don't see that sort of unified voice coming out of the Black Sea region.
Would you see the work you're doing at the Center for European Policy Analysis and our organization doing some joint projects to try to create that reality?
Well, I would love that. Yeah, anything that would elevate the appreciation for the strategic significance, not only to compete with the Russians, because the Russians use the Black Sea as their launching pad for all the bad that they do in Syria and in Africa, the Eastern Med, as well as the Caucasus and the Balkans, but also because of the economic potential. If you think about the East-West economic corridor between Eurasia and Europe, there's basically three routes. One goes through Russia, one goes through Iran, and the middle one goes through the South Caucasus. So it's to our benefit, Europe's benefit, that you don't have Russian troops there, and that Georgia and Azerbaijan, for example, are allowed to develop the infrastructure. And I think your recent travel, you know that better than me.
Yes.
I would love to see CEPA and the ICRC work together to help elevate that. And by the way, I will give you an invitation right now to please join what we just created, something called the Black Sea Working Group. It's not a CEPA entity, but we host it. And it's a collection of people from think tanks around DC, retired diplomats, et cetera. It's a network that meets every other month, a network of people that care about the Black Sea, that understand it, and are trying to elevate the strategic appreciation. We're advocates, if you will.
And we'll be very happy to do that. And Jacob could reach out for you to you for that. Jacob Levitan, who's on this call as our host. Let me go to our trip for a minute. I mean, we went to Azerbaijan to get a full picture. We did not go to Azerbaijan as stooges of Azerbaijan or to hurt Armenia. We went there to look at a frozen conflict that Russia is a part of. Given that the war is over and there are 1,400 Russian peacekeepers there in that region, in the Karabakh region, that the Azeris took back, basically, pushed out of their territory, the Armenian forces. These Russian peacekeepers there, what do you make of their role? I mean, they seem to be, a lot of them just seem to be doing, from what we can gather, they're basically acting as cops, and in the most basic terms of that. Making sure somebody's car doesn't get stolen and things like that. There doesn't seem to be that stereotypical, if you will, peacekeeper role that you've seen in, say, the Middle East, on the African continent, as a real buffer. What do you make of what's going on that Russia's doing, or its end game there in Armenia vis-a-vis the Black Sea?
So I had a Polish friend one time telling me, he laughed, he said, yeah, Russian peacekeepers, they show up and they keep a peace, P-I-E-C-E. and that's what we've got going on now in Nagorno-Karabakh. Because the United States has not had a sustained, consistent strategic view of the region, and particularly of the South Caucasus, you now have Russian troops in all three countries. Of course, 20% of Georgia remains occupied, as you well know.
Yes.
11 years after the so-called Sarkozy agreement was signed, and the Russians should have left there, and they clearly have zero intention of leaving there, but yet there's no pressure from the French or anybody else for them to leave. You still have Russian bases in Armenia left over from the time of the Soviet Union. And now, thanks to this agreement, you've got about 1,500 Russian troops in Azerbaijan, in Nagorno-Karabakh. So all three countries have Russian troops there. So the remaining corridor between Eurasia and Europe now has Russian troops sitting there. That's why they're there. Not because they're so anxious to see flowers start blooming again in the region, is to make sure that they can influence what goes on there. And we took, I don't say we took our eye off the ball. I don't know if we ever had our eye on the ball. We've had some absolutely superb professional diplomats serving in the embassies in all the three countries there. So it's not like our ambassadors didn't know what they were doing. but there's got to be a strategic policy coming from Washington that generates policies for our ambassadors, and we haven't competed there.
And this, do you feel that these, things like the Southern Gas Corridor, would you think that that's leverage to use on the EU, on NATO, and that leverage can then be leveraged on the Black Sea? Because, this is, you had mentioned before European dependence, especially Germany and France, on Russia. Well, now we have gas coming out of this, this new part of the ancient Silk Road that Europe is dependent on. Can that be used as leverage to say, look, we've got a situation where they are in striking distance of the Silk Road of 3,000 years of trade that they can pounce on and pinch off? Is this some kind of leverage that can be used?
Well, the Kremlin has used energy as a weapon from the beginning, and we've been slow to actually act on that, whether you're talking about the Baltics, Poland, Ukraine, or in the Black Sea region. So we need to wake up and be clear-eyed and understand that this is about business, but it's also about leverage. It's about power. And Berlin has tried to, for example, with Nord Stream 2, to say, that's separate. That's not politics. That's economic. That's business. Nobody in Moscow makes that distinction. You know that. And so, sure, part of our strategy will have to include economic policy and energy policy. The very old familiar construct for strategy and for great power competition is what we call the DIME construct, DIME, diplomacy, information, military, and economy. So the strategy has got to address ends, ways, and means in all four of those domains.
Finally, and we'll just kind of freewheel after this. What do you see the Center for European Policy Analysis doing in terms of aiding the international community, the United States, particularly State Department, possibly even the Pentagon, White House, and NATO member states in understanding what these very real threats are, and basically educating them? We can be specific as the Sea of Azov. We can be as general as the Black Sea and the Caucasus. What do you see your role as?
Well, of course, one of the reasons I joined CEPA when I retired from the Army, my last job was as Commanding General of U.S. Army Europe in Wiesbaden, and I left there in January of 2018, and I went straight to work at CEPA because it wasn't one of the biggest think tanks. It's very small compared to, say, Atlantic Council or Brookings, for example, but I was attracted by their focus on NATO's eastern flank and specifically on the Black Sea region. So that has attracted me from the beginning, and candidly, the style of reports and studies that CEPA does always feature very solid, meaningful, challenging, but attainable recommendations. We've recently published a report called One Flank, One Threat, One Presence, which is a strategy for NATO's eastern flank, which really talks about increasing the level of effort by NATO in the Black Sea region, because NATO was focused on the Baltic region, but not so much in the Black Sea region. So this incoherence left a seam that was easily exploitable by the Kremlin. We also just recently published a paper called Black Sea or Black Hole, which focuses less on military and more on the diplomacy, information, and economic aspects of what the West needs to do to compete in the Black Sea. And then, as I mentioned, our Black Sea Working Group is a network that continues to grow of people who understand and care about the Black Sea region and are committed to raising awareness in Washington and in Brussels. Our last meeting 2 weeks ago, we We had experts from the Development Finance Corporation, which is the arm of the U.S. government that helps do economic development.
Right.
And we had former Ambassador Adrian Zuckerman, who was very successful at competing economically inside Romania against the Chinese.
I see. Let's back up a little bit and talk about.
I have to say, I've only got like 4 more minutes.
Okay, just bilaterally then. What do you think bilaterally the United States can do about the Donbas region, Crimea, Sea of Azov? Has that horse left the barn?
Well, no. I've had friends from Lithuania tell me that how important it was that the United States never acknowledged Russia's annexation of Lithuania, never formally acknowledged that that was officially a Soviet republic. Same for Latvia and Estonia. So the long-term strategic persistence of the United States on never ever recognizing Russia's annexation of Crimea and what they're doing in Donbass. That's important. That's important to the people that are there. And then, of course, if we're serious about a policy, then that has implications for what we do about that policy. For example, we should be demanding that any vessel that sails out of Crimea, out of any of the ports around Crimea, that those are automatically contraband. Because President Poroshenko, when he was the president of Ukraine, said that all the ports are closed. So that means that Russia is technically under international law, and because nobody recognizes their annexation except, I think, Venezuela and Syria and North Korea. So
Right.
that means that any vessel that sails from, say, Yalta or Sevastopol is automatically illegal. And so it should not be allowed to enter any other European port. And no insurance company should insure those vessels.
Exactly.
Now, these are the kinds of actions, when you add them all together, they have impact. But that's going to take a commitment by the United States to do the hard work to get that done. But that's an example. And I think when the president says Ukrainian sovereignty is a priority for the United States, in his first phone call with President Putin, I hope he does what I hope he backs it up with action.
Thank you. With that last word, General Hodges. So, General Ben Hodges, we've guest of International Conflict Resolution Center. Thank you so much. You will be hearing from us, and we'll be hearing more from you. Great. So, thank you, General. Take care.
No, thanks for the privilege, Professor Chambers.